Znači, kad N1 dovede u svoj studio Hrvoja Klasnića, takozvanog povjesničara, demagoga i Garija Korena, veleposlanika Izraela, znači, povraća mi se. Idemo vidjeti, ovo je bivši, kaže, znači, bivši Pentagonov djelatnik, kaže, Iran nikada nije bio prijetnja. Pa usporedimo to sa izjavama ovog špijuna Garija Korena u Hrvatskoj. On je špijun, ljudi moji, on je vojno djelatna osoba, on nema šta raditi u Hrvatskoj, nam to je jasno. Po šta je Anušić išao u Izrael i s kime je dogovarao se, šta su razgovarali i o čemu su dogovarali, niti jedan jedini medij to nije prenio. Šta vi novinari radite? Jer vi mislite da su mi retardirani svi ili šta?
They soften up public opinion. Because if we look up, I'm a geriatric millennial, I remember the run up to the Iraq war, and it went on and on. You know, the full-blown works, Colin Powell, Secretary of State of the UN, doing this pack of lies presentation, which he later, regretted having helped facilitate one of the great crimes of that particular period. And it was just relentless bombardment in Britain.
Gledala sam jučer nekakvo izvješće iz UN-a, tam taj izraelski nekakav štajlaprdo. Pa zašto uopće dozvoljavaju genocidnoj državi da se pojavljuje tamo? Pa to cijeli svijet mora osuditi, gotovi smo. Gotovi smo, ljudi moji.
Tony Blair, we have the intelligence, 45 minutes till we're going to get bombed by Iraq. They're not softened up public opinion. How do you explain that?
Yeah, I think we can explain that with the 20 odd years between now and the 2003 invasion of Iraq. And you could also add on to that, the Bush administration was so successful that nobody ever really had to make that case again, because what followed 2 decades of nearly constant war in the Middle East, and the American people really got normalized to the idea that even if we withdrew our large ground occupation, the United...
To vam je taj lažni narativ koji cionistički projekt cijelo vrijeme lansira, da su nama muslimani prijetnja. Jesu fanatici. Fanatici jesu. Isto kao i ovi židovski fanatici i lažni kršćanski fanatici. Svaki fanatizam je prijetnja, da. Ali ovi su posebni. Ovi su posebni.
United States would be bombing countries around the Middle East non-stop, no matter who the president was. And after Bush, Obama, Biden, and Trump all campaigned on pulling out of Middle Eastern wars or the war in Afghanistan. They kept those promises to varying extents, but none of them stopped finding targets in the Middle East to bomb, even if it was from afar. And so it's very hard, I think, now, especially with Trump doing so many new military interventions, for folks who are not super tapped into foreign policy or the news to understand at the outset, well, why is this different? Why is it bad if Trump is bombing Venezuela? We've been bombing these countries in the Middle East and Africa for years, and nobody told me that was a problem. Big military buildup in the Middle East, I think until Americans start, unfortunately, coming back in body bags. Hard for that to break through as well.
Kao što sam rekla, projekt tog satanističkog antikristovog takozvanog velikog Izraela, pod navodnicima, koji se nikad neće ostvariti, je da osvoje tamo cijeli Bliski istok. Cijeli Bliski istok, a pretenzija im je vladavina nad čitavim svijetom i uspostava njihovog Sanhedrin suda vjerskog. 70 mudraca, oni će zamijeniti UN i oni će suditi cijelom svijetu, oni će suditi gojimima, idolopoklonicima, svima nama, koje nas po njihovom Talmudu sve treba istrijebiti. To su njihove riječi, nemojte, ja ponavljam njihove riječi. Znači, mi smo svi gojimi i nas treba pobiti, mi smo stoka. Mi smo stoka, oni su Božji izabrani narod. Kod Gige u šupi.
Same reason, because folks wouldn't know that it's out of the ordinary.
In terms of just talking about the shifting motives
Yeah.
that have been expressed. I mean, we had Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, suggest that it was because Israel was going to bomb Iran, and that caused, that would cause Iran to bomb US targets. So preemptively, the US decided to attack Iran for that reason. Donald Trump since has come out and said that actually it wasn't Israel that forced his hand, that I think they were going to attack first, and I didn't want that to happen. We had Trump talking originally about the protests, that's why the Armada was coming. Then it was about a deal over nuclear material and so on. I mean, there's just, there's not been a clear position. What do you make of that as someone who worked in the inside?
Well, as somebody who worked on the inside, I'm tremendously glad that I did not get assigned to a aimless war, right? That's already cost U.S. service members their lives, and two of the bases that have gotten hit, I served at. I was at the Navy headquarters in Bahrain. I was in Kuwait. That could have been me and a lot of other folks. I think the Trump probably doesn't quite know what he got into this war for, but I think Rubio and Netanyahu do, and like one way to understand the constant shifting rationales, and you forgot another one they added, which was actually it's not regime change, it's not the protesters, it's not the nukes. We actually, I think the most official
Prokleti Izrael želi osvojiti Iran I Rusiju, šta nije tu jasno?
To fire and produce missiles and drones and destroy their navy. So that's another one tacked on. So the reason they haven't had a steady rationale is, I think, the actual aims of the Israeli government and some of their backers in D.C. Really still sound too horrible to sell to the
Izraelsku vladu izbrisat s lica zemlje. MAGA sektu izbrisat s lica zemlje. I gotovi smo. Maknuti ih, procesuirat, zatvor, šta god. Maknuti, ščupat, iskorijenit zlo, kukolj. Izrael I Amerika su zlo koje jednostavno čačka, čačka, čačka I čačka.
American people, and they basically want to collapse the Iranian state's ability to function as a state, right? Netanyahu's goal and other Israeli
Oni će
goal
Mesiju
is that
dovesti,
Iran
luđaci,
should no longer
poremećeni,
even
bolesni.
a hypothetical threat to the state of Israel, and that means they can't have any
Djecu
weapons.
žrtvuju.
Might mean they can't have any
Djevojčice ste ubili, gamad jedna genocidna prokleta.
They can't really have a functioning government because
Sotone, sotonske, fuj.
It's going to be friendly to Israel, right? There's not. You could fantasize about regime change, but you could magically have elections tomorrow. The person who won is not going to say, "Oh, I'd like to make peace with Israel." That's not because of any insane Iranian ideology. It's because they've been tormented by this country for quite a long time and fought proxy wars with them, and so that's unfortunately an achievable goal. Regime change, extremely difficult. I would say probably impossible. Regime collapse, that's good enough. Certainly good enough for Israel and good enough for Iran hawks in the U.S. who have a similar view, which is that it's just unacceptable that
koji
there's a country
surađuju
that
sa
exists in the
genocidnim
Middle East
Izraelom,
that
da.
defies the United States
Saudijska
and defies
Arabija I
the state of
Jordan.
Israel.
Prodane
Donald
duše.
Trump have that in mind? Almost certainly not. Every report, including his own interview, suggests he was convinced that this would be just like Venezuela, which he sees as a stunning success. It was basically a one-day military operation that immediately, as far as we know, installed a pliant replacement authoritarian. Now that hasn't happened, he's got to figure out new ways to explain what's going on.
It's a really interesting point you made about chaos, because a lot of observers have made that point that what Israel wants, or would be benefited most, would be in Iran that collapses into chaos is permanently weakened and hobbled. And that is too risky for it to, ends up even, with a different government, because things could change in the future. It's a country of 90 plus million. It will always potentially pose a threat. Better to balkanize it and fragment it. William Hague, the former British Foreign Secretary, is a conservative. He wrote a piece in the Times newspaper which says, well, actually, chaos wouldn't be it's not in the strategic interest of the US or the West in general. He said it would inevitably bring the need to intervene on the ground to allow, it goes on like that. So he says basically that kind of chaos would be, not least for the kind of Western allies in the Gulf, would be a bad idea. I mean, what do you think about that? Actually, that might be good for Israel, but is it good for the West strategically?
It's an abysmal outcome for everybody. In the U.S., in Europe, certainly in the Middle East, right? I don't want to overlook the human cost already in Iran. But what could state collapse look like? It means, like you said, country of 90 million people, refugees going both east and west.
Prokleti
Not an expert
Satanjahu,
on
prokleto
European politics,
stvorenje
but I would
odurno.
say some countries have struggled to adapt to receiving refugees politically, based off what we saw after Iraq and Syria. You have a country that is filled with military equipment. They don't have nuclear weapons, but they have some kind of nuclear material. Imagine losing accountability of that, right? Imagine drones, uranium, what have you. We don't know where it is anymore because there's no government. So really the only beneficiary maybe of collapsing the state would be Israel, but in the long run, I'm not even sure that would be true for them.
I mean, because Libya is an instructive
Tako je.
example.
Fuck off, Israel. Fuck you.